Welcome back to the Black Health Lit podcast. This is a space where we can be Black, proud, and healthy. As a reminder, the information shared here is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. While you're here, check out the episode description to learn more about today's guest and shop Black, Proud, Healthy merch. When you shop merch, you're helping to support future episodes and free health education for the Black Health Lit community. Lastly, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this episode. Are you ready to take your brand to the next level? Introducing L'Amour Lifestyle Public Relations, the experts in media relations. With a track record of success, their clients have been featured in Essence Magazine, News 12, Fox 45, and many more. Whether you're aiming for national recognition or local visibility, their team will craft the perfect strategy to elevate your brand. From Houston Chronicles to Good Morning Washington, they've got you covered. Contact L'Amour Public Relations today and let them help you make headlines. Visit www.lamourlifestylepr.com to learn more. All right, welcome back to the Black Health Lit podcast. Today, I am talking with Dr. Marcus Coleman. You are my first two-timer on the Black Health Lit podcast. And last time, you were just Marcus Coleman with a master's, but now you are Dr. Coleman.
I'm still just Marcus. It's just three letters that end up behind your name. That's all it is.
Some extra three letters. So Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for coming back. Last time we recorded, I was very early on in my podcast journey, so the editing was not great. So if you're listening, he is a two-timer, but the episode has since been pulled down because my editing was so poor. But
I thought it was just you didn't like me.
No, no, it was, I think you may have been like my second or third guest on my podcast. So thank you so much for coming back. I believe it has been 3 years since you were on. It was 2021, and we talked about food systems, health equity, and you've done so much work since then. You continue to do the work. So before we jump into the interview questions and topics, can you introduce yourself to my audience?
Hey, Ray, it's a pleasure to be back with you here today and talk to you and just to share some knowledge with the audience. Right now, I'm currently hanging out at Tulane University. I'm a professor there. I have a joint appointment between our Department of Economics and our Strategy, Leadership, and Analytics program. I'm also on our faculty advisory committee for our environmental studies program. Being at Tulane has been an interesting experience. It's a totally different sort of place than I've previously been in my career it's a private school. But we have very engaged students, and from a food systems perspective, we have students that really care about their communities and care about fixing the food system, and so that makes that opportunity really special for me.
Okay, very nice. When I was pursuing my master's in public health, I wanted to go to Tulane so bad. Oh my God, I really did. But, finances, location, and deadlines didn't allow for that to happen.
And you were just trying to go to New Orleans. You wouldn't worry about the public health program. You were just trying to hang out in New Orleans.
Surprisingly, my grandmother, when I went to undergrad, my grandmother actually wanted me to go to LSU. She really did. Yep. She wanted me to go
Tigers, there. I know you hang out in Buckeye country there, but they have nothing on the LSU Tigers, and you would have had a great time here in Baton Rouge. I actually still live in Baton Rouge.
You know what? I'm not going to agree with you, but I'm not going to disagree. I think LSU gives a lot of people hell, for sure.
They do. Absolutely.
They give a lot of people hell. The LSU in Georgia, they play a different game.
we about that football life.
Oh, for sure. So let's jump right in, Marcus. First of all, what is a food system? What does that mean?
There's a lot of technical definitions that you can use for a food system, but essentially I look at a food system as being the process of whatever it takes from the time something, some type of food, something is grown or produced until the time that it reaches the final consumer. And for many people, that has many different definitions. From a broader perspective, you're looking at, farmers or producers and the input supply sector, the people who make sure that farmers and producers have seeds and they have all of the different equipment, everything that they need to grow the food that we ultimately eat as the two first components of the food system. After that, You have commodity processors, food manufacturers, you have the distribution channels, you have the retail system, and ultimately you have the consumers from sort of that broader food systems perspective. You also have direct marketing where, consumers get products directly from farmers. And so that's like your local
Mm.
farmers markets, community supported agricultural models, subscription services where people will pay a subscription fee to a farmer over the course of 8 to 12 weeks. And each week in that process, they receive a box of produce. And so ultimately, it's just the culmination of things that allow us as people to eat food, whether we buy that food, exchange that food, or receive that food in some other way. It's just the process of us getting access to the food that we want or need.
Okay. So, what interests you? What made you interested, sorry, in food systems? Because that's not a
Sure.
common thing we grow up hearing. I want to grow up and fix the food systems.
Well, I mean, I grew up in rural Louisiana and rural Northeast Louisiana, to be exact, which is very different than many rural areas in the rest of the state. And so, growing up, heavy agricultural part of the state, but much of the agriculture there, most of the agriculture there was centered around growing things like cotton, corn, and soybeans.
Okay.
And we thought, growing up, you thought that primarily was what agriculture was about. As you sort of get older and get a little bit more knowledge in you about sort of those things, you understand that we had one. We at the time when I was growing up, much younger, we had two local grocery stores, and ultimately became one grocery store in the parish in the town, but the quality of food offerings was lacking, or if they
Okay.
had high quality food offerings, they were of high price. And so thinking back to sort of the situation that I grew up in rural Louisiana, and not only that situation, but similar situations that we find in rural areas around the country, and even urban centers around the country,
Yeah.
it really helped me to really get an understanding of what defines those systems, but also it gave me an interest in trying to help fix those things. And it was one real defining moment that sort of led to that. I was in grad school at Michigan State in
Okay.
agricultural economics, doing my master's degree there, and many of the graduate students in my program were interested in international agricultural development, where they would go
Hmm.
to sub-Saharan Africa, different parts of Asia, Central America, and work to improve the agricultural sector of the food system of those countries. But 70 miles down the road from East Lansing in Detroit, Michigan, we had those same issues, and nobody sought to really address those issues or work was interested, at least in my program, in addressing those issues. And so if we
Okay.
can spend as much time working on these issues internationally, why not do them right here at home? And ever since then, I've had a 90% domestic focus in my interest in whether that's in Detroit, whether that's in New Orleans, whether that's in rural communities around the country. That's just what ended up being my interest.
Okay. That's very helpful to know your background and how you ended up in it and how it really connects to your daily work and your teachings. So, you mentioned right down the street, and I think that we do this a lot as Americans. We it's easy for us to say, "Oh, I want to go fix something over there, wherever there is." But we sometimes don't want to face what's right in our backyards or right next door. It's a much easier problem to solve, in my opinion, sometimes. But for some reason, as Americans, we don't always operate like that. So that's a good segue to talk about some of the historical inequities in the food system that continue to impact specifically the Black community. So, can you talk about, from a historical perspective and maybe a little bit in the present, how the food system has been unequal and not as accessible to the Black community?
Sure. I mean, the history of Black folks in the food system or in agriculture has been well written, going back to the time of slavery and sort of the impact and the role that, enslaved Africans had in building essentially the American food system, the American food chain. And so much of the food system structure that we now enjoy was built on the backs of enslaved people.
Yeah.
Much of the history of food culture that we have in various parts of this country, particularly the southeastern part of the country, is that of African heritage. And so Black people and Black communities have always had a very entrenched part and component in building the food system and being a part of the food system. I think it's important to know that while there are many negative connotations related to Black people in agriculture, related to Black people in agriculture, Black
Right.
people in the food system, yes, while those things occurred, there are also some positive aspects related to how we built that thing. And you can't mention food systems or food in the South or food around much of this country without really acknowledging the role and the history that Black people have played in that food system. It's unfortunately, though, that because of that history, because of those inequities, because of how people were treated as a part of that, it's
Right.
driven many people away from that agricultural foundation that built much of that. And so, historically, we've seen, over time, a declining number of Black farmers in America, just because the amount of work that goes in agriculture, and work in agriculture is hard enough, but
Yeah.
also fighting to get equal rights, to get equal services, to get equal resources as to other farmers. That's a struggle, and that drove
Yeah.
a lot of people away from agriculture. And so, that intersection, whether negative or positive, is completely entrenched within Black America here,
Yeah.
and we played a role in it. And some of that stuff still exists today.
Yeah, for sure. I had two guests actually, from an organization in Columbus, Ohio called Growing and Growth Collective. And in that and their whole mission is to re-engage Black people with the land. And when we were talking, they were like, when you bring up the land or agriculture to Black people, the first thing we think of is cotton fields and slavery. And we're like, nah, I'm good. I don't want anything. I don't want my hands in the dirt because my ancestors fought to not have to have their hands in the dirt, or as well as allies sometimes. But can you say that you would agree with that, or think that you've seen that same mindset among Black people? Like when we think about the land, when we think about agriculture, we're like, cotton fields, and I'm good on that.
Yes, unfortunately, yes, and I'll say unfortunately from this perspective. I think that our ancestors fought for fair treatment. When
Yeah,
we owned the land, we fought for fair treatment in our land ownership process. We fought for fair treatment in how we manage the land and the resources that were afforded to us, and in order to be successful farmers.
yeah,
That's certainly a part of it. But over time, looking at the history of this thing, right? I do see that's sort of the perception that many people have related to agriculture.
yeah,
About 6, 7 months ago, I drove up through the Mississippi Delta on the Mississippi side of the Mississippi River through the Delta. It was right in the middle of cotton harvest. Because I grew up in rural Louisiana, because I've been in agriculture for almost formally and informally for almost 40 years now, I look
mm-hmm,
at agricultural production in sort of a different light. And I could just imagine in driving up through, I mean, literally through the middle of the Mississippi Delta, much of that land, and how that land was worked and who could have potentially owned some of that land years ago.
yeah,
And whether, we sort of, stiff arm and go a different direction from the connection between Black people, agriculture, food systems, and the land. The
yeah,
history of all of this is well entrenched in us. And so we do see a national movement to get more people back engaged and back involved in the land. And I think
yeah,
a part of that requires us to be completely educated fully on what the food system is, what the food system means, the history of the food system, and the connection of the food system related to agriculture. I mean, if you think about the educational system, if 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 an individual's introduction to the food system is simply during Black History Month when we're talking about the history of
yeah,
slavery in this country, of course that's going to be the first thing that comes to people's mind.
right,
But when we owned the land, we had wealth in owning the land. If there was not wealth involved in owning the land, other people wouldn't have put inequities in place to get the land away from us, right?
right,
And so we had wealth in that regard, and systemic factors and other factors have just sort of allowed that to be taken away from us. And so we do see a movement of people being more interested in learning about more about the food system. There are a number of great organizations across the country that are doing a great job in this work to re-educate, if you will, communities
yeah,
into some of this stuff, but also to introduce people to the art of farming, and you know, owning the land and working the land and taking control of the land. And that's a
yeah,
powerful thing. And some people even argue that it's a spiritual thing, right?
absolutely. I can agree with that. I don't grow outdoors. My sister more so grows veggies, peppers, tomatoes, things like that outside. I can grow stuff inside inside the house. I'm more of a potted girl.
You're an indoor
But
green thumb.
yeah, so I have a green thumb. Like I'm looking at my monstera I grew from 6 inches. It's about 5 feet tall now. So I can grow. But I know that when I repot my plants inside or outside, it is like a relief. It's a serene moment to have my hands in the dirt. So I can see how you say it can be something that's spiritual for people to experience.
And there are a number of different things. I mean, whether that's growing plants in your house, I mean, they even have some technologies now where people are essentially putting growing chambers in their home and growing out different greens and peppers in boxes or chambers in their home. If you don't have access to be able to grow something outside in the
Yeah.
dirt, just the process of you taking a seed and nurturing that seed and growing
Yeah.
that seed into something that can be useful to you, both, from nurturing your body and just sort of a mental thing and just
Yes.
giving you something to do can be a very powerful thing, right?
Yep. They say you should have something alive in your home.
Yeah. Other
I
than
can
you, right?
use other than you, right? You definitely want to be alive, but other than you, your kids, your dog, and your family members,
Yeah.
definitely something alive in your home. So you talked about education, and that's one of the ways that we can address the inequities and the systemic things and the historical experience. We can't fix it, but that's how we can address it. Are there any other actions or steps that you think that we can take as the Black community to get re-engaged with the land and or the food system?
Sure. I mean, if you look at, and I'll use urban agriculture as an example. Many of the major cities around this country have urban agriculture initiatives, whether that's, people that are farming revenue based farms, people that are farming for profit, whether that's community based organizations that have developed community gardens, right?
Yeah,
There are a number of opportunities, and these opportunities can be found across the country where you can go out and be engaged. But the issue that people have is sort of finding out what those opportunities are. And so, doing just a simple Google search related to, urban agriculture, local food systems initiatives that is happening in your city. And I'll give an example. I live in Baton Rouge, work in New Orleans, right? Both
mm-hmm.
Baton Rouge and New Orleans have amazing farmers market. There's an amazing
Mm.
organization here in Baton Rouge, and there's an amazing organization in New Orleans, Bretta here in Baton Rouge and Market Umbrella in New Orleans, that facilitate a
Okay.
wonderful farmers market series. And you'd be surprised at the number of people that don't know that these robust market exist, right? And
Wow.
so just doing a simple Google search about local farmers markets in your area, just to go out and check it out, whether you want to buy something or not, go out and check it out and see what it's about. Meet a farmer, have a conversation with a farmer. Just those conversations, along with whether it's farmers or other people at the farmers market, can also give you an opportunity to learn and be aware of different opportunities that are happening.
Yeah.
Some states have within the land grant institution. So, like in Ohio
Mm-hmm.
State is a land grant institution. Here in Louisiana, LSU is a land grant institution. Have what they call master gardener programs where you can learn to be a gardener. They have other
Hmm.
different organizations within cities have other initiatives where they're just teaching people how to garden, and within that process they'll give you seeds, they'll give you the equipment
Yeah.
if you're willing to learn. So these things are happening all across the country. The thing that I find though is that our people, Black people, tend to not know that these initiatives
Right.
exist, and so we've got to be able to sort of help push our people into the direction to learn and seek out these opportunities because other folks
Yeah.
are doing it, right?
Yep. They sure are. In the summertime, I love a good farmer's market.
Absolutely.
Like one of my girlfriends will go, and when we get there, you don't know all the time what the farmer is going to have or what they'll have an abundance of. So we'll call each other from the farmer's market in the summer and be like, girl, they got the poblanos today. You want me to pick you up a few extra peppers or watermelon? I love watermelon from the farmer's market. Watermelon at the grocery store, it ain't never right. It don't be right.
So, and that's a good point. And that's a good point that you make there, related to going shopping at the farmer's market versus shopping at the grocery store. The produce that you'll purchase at the farmer's market, if indeed it comes directly from a farmer, and that farmer is produced and harvested that produce, stays on the vine, stays on the tree, stays in the ground up longer at a much longer rate, and is allowed to ripen more than produce that you'll get from the grocery
Ah,
store. Produce that you get from the grocery store, depending on where it comes from, is oftentimes harvested early and put in certain gases in order to make it look a certain way to ship. So, for example, if you're in Ohio or you're in Louisiana and you're getting produce from the grocery store, if you check where that produce comes from, if it's produce from California, if it's produce from Mexico or somewhere
yeah,
else in Latin America, that produce was harvested much before it was ripe, because it's got to travel a certain distance.
right.
Depending on how long it takes the produce to travel from its harvest point to its retail point, there's no telling, how long that produce has been off the vine. But
Hmm.
it doesn't stay on the vine, the tree, or the ground up until its harvest point, like the produce that you would get from a local farmers market. That it's very likely that the produce that you're getting from a farmers market could possibly have been harvested that morning or the
Yes.
day before, and so you tend to get fresher produce that way.
It tastes so much better. The tomatoes is another one, the watermelon. I don't buy potatoes really from the farmer's market. That's usually not what they offer, but for sure, peppers, tomatoes, watermelon, honeydew, cantaloupe, all that stuff. The summer fruits, really. The strawberries in the little green container instead
Sure,
of the plastic container. It's like those are
sure,
different. It's different. I don't care what nobody says.
sure.
Um, so can you talk a little bit about how food insecurity, I know that's a buzzword, food insecurity, access to nutritious foods, and then the health outcomes that we experience as Black people are all related?
It's a loaded question, right? I'll
Yeah.
approach it from the perspective of food access. In order to sustain life, in order to sustain healthy life, directly relates to what we put in our bodies. In many ways, what we put in our bodies relates directly to our access to food. And so, food access for me is defined, is sort of a defining point in seven different ways, or what we'll call the 7 A's.
Okay.
The three of the 7 A's that are most important are accessibility, affordability, and availability, which is typically what we look at as a part of. So when we're talking about affordability, we're talking about from the perspective of, is a consumer actually able to afford a certain type of produce, and so that relates
Right.
to price of the product, available budget, like how much money do consumers have to spend on that particular product. It could also be something like perception about prices of a certain product as a part of that. When we talk about excessive availability, is there a sufficient amount of a certain type of food that's available for a customer to go and buy, right?
Hmm.
And so just because you have grocery stores or you have a convenience store available in a certain neighborhood, a certain community, are those helpful food items actually available there? Are they in sufficient quantity to actually serve the community? The other part of this is accessibility, the ease to which people or consumers can actually get to the location
Yeah.
where you can purchase healthy food from. And so, just because here in Baton Rouge, there's a conversation about that. We're building a new grocery store in North Baton Rouge. But when I look at the location that the grocery store was built, people that Black people that actually live in North Baton Rouge, they
Yeah.
don't have a car. They can't really get to that grocery store to get the food, right? Or
Right.
is public transportation adequate enough to get that person? I mean, if that person needs to go we say make groceries here in Louisiana. Everybody else in the country will say, "Well, we're going to shop for groceries," but we make groceries down here. If it takes that person 12 hours or 6 hours to ride the bus from where they live to where the grocery store is that actually efficient, right? So
Right.
there's these seven sort of access points related to food access that we'll look at. But again, the most important of those seven are those three: accessibility, availability, and affordability. And again, that relates directly to what a person, what a consumer, what an individual is able to put into their body.
Yeah.
And so as we're dealing with initiatives that actually seek to alleviate things like food insecurity in communities and how well people can get access to food, we have to, that's often, those three areas are often the first three starting points
Yeah.
of how we seek to help people to do those things, get access to a wide variety of helpful foods, right? And if you can't do that, it's sort of, consumers sort of start in a bad place. Now,
Yeah.
there are a number of ways that we do that, in particular for farmers market. People may say, well, if I'm shopping at a farmers market, I can't afford to pay the prices of a farmers market. Well, and that may be true in some regard,
Yeah.
but some farmers markets actually do accept EBT payments, right? Some
Yep.
farmers markets have double up bucks program. For every dollar you spend, you get an additional dollar. It essentially increases the purchasing power, if you will, of the consumer. So there are
Yeah.
programs that are available, just like when we go to the grocery store to get certain things, which is typically more processed foods that are available to help
Yep.
consumers get access to these programs. And so, programs like SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, is designed to help combat food insecurity in some ways. But we have to be better educated about how we best use these programs and where we can
Right.
use these programs to get in not only the most bang for our buck, which is typically one of the starting place for consumers, but we want to make sure that we're getting quality from our buck.
Yes.
And if we can get quality from our buck, that can relate directly to better health outcomes in communities.
Yeah. For
Um,
sure. For sure. I
the
wanted
other
to
point.
add. Oh,
Mhm.
sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing that I would point out is, like, if you look at many black communities, and I'll what I see here in Baton Rouge where I live, we're building more and more urgent care facilities, health related
Hmm.
facilities, than we are food access facilities and grocery stores and those things. So keep that in mind as a part of that process too. We're working backwards in the process instead of addressing directly what the issue is within it. So
Yep, yep. And that is part, so that's, I'm glad you brought that up. There is a huge overlap, in my opinion. You tell me if you agree, between our health system and our food systems. And I know that some states or municipalities have been piloting food prescriptions. So doctors can write prescriptions for food. You mentioned using SNAP or EBT at farmers market. Another thing that that I feel like people underutilize is the free produce. Especially in the summer. There is so much produce given away in the summer. Drive-throughs at churches, community centers, on the side of the road. People are giving away lots of fruits and vegetables. And one approach could be, and this is just me going off the cuff, there seems to be an abundance of produce in the summer, which makes sense, right? Canning. We need to bring canning back. Because okay, it's cool to have a feast in the summer with produce, but then when the winter gets here and you still have to feed your family and you
sure.
can't get some free tomatoes on the side of the road, now what? And I think canning might be a way to kind of carry that food, that abundance of the summer over into the fall. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm probably about to cross a sensitive line in gender roles, but if we look at sort of the history of the educational system, when we taught things like home ec in the
Yeah.
schools, we taught those types of skills in the schools. And actually, still to this day, many of the extension services that are attached to land grant institutions, it still have classes where they teach people how to can. I
Oh,
visited a farm, and it's probably been 5 years ago or so, and they gave me this big box of, it was some tomatoes in the box, it was some green peppers in the box, I think it was some onions in the box, it was a bunch of, and some cucumbers in the box. This
yeah.
big box. All right, what am I going to do with this? I went and bought some mason jars. I had never canned anything in my life. But one
Hmm.
of the things that most of us have access to now is the internet, right?
Yep.
But I knew I needed some mason jars, and so I went on the internet and I Googled how to make pickles and how to make salsa. I had everything that I needed to make salsa except jalapeno peppers, which I went to the grocery store and bought. I quickly Googled a recipe to put that together, which worked
Yep.
out. and I YouTube videos on how to do it. And so I think I made 8 jars of salsa and about 8 jars of canned pickles. And based upon I
Mm.
had this produce and I didn't know what to do with it. And so canning is very much a way of how we can get by. If you know you like to eat chips and salsa, and you know you can get access to a wide variety of tomatoes, onions, and things like
Yep.
that, why not can it? You can have all the salsa that you want, and you made it by hand, right?
Yep.
And so many of those land grant institutions still have those programs, but even outside of that, you don't need those programs. Google is a very powerful tool
It
to,
is.
to learn how to do that, and that's real. I mean, like you said, there's all kind of stuff being given away in the summertime, whether it's of great quality or if it's not of great quality. If it isn't, we
Yeah.
can do something with it that's of quality, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. My mother cans, so that's why that my mother and one of my great aunts cans, and my mom goes all out. Like when she's canning, don't visit, get out the way, because she will go to Dollar Tree. Dollar Tree
Absolutely,
has all the mason jars. She'll get the little
absolutely.
ones, the medium ones, big. She pickles, she cans. My mom does the most, but she definitely cans. And I'm like, you an old player, right? Like,
Yeah. I mean, that is a lost art and a skill that I think is invaluable, particularly like if you say you started a garden in your backyard and you got a surplus of something that you can't, it's not shelf stable, it's going to
yeah.
spoil at some point. So make something useful out of it where you can eat it later and it'll still be good, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Okay. So that's another strategy. We talked about educating ourselves, going to food pantries, churches, connecting with a local farmer. Some of the local farmers are really, really nice. I got some delicious honey from a farmer for free once. And he just was like, "You want to try this honey?" And it was a smaller jar, but sometimes they will give you stuff because they're just nice people sometimes. Um, so those are a few approaches that people can use with or without money, SNAP or EBT, to be able to access fruits and vegetables specifically.
Sure.
So it's 2024. It is a huge election year. I forgot to put my sticker on. I voted today. We are voting in Ohio today for judges and presidents or primaries and all sorts of things. Ohio is a swing state, the heart of it
Yes,
all.
you are.
Uh, we're a purple state. I don't know. It depends on the day. Are we red? Are we
Depends
blue?
on
Are
the
we
day,
purple?
right?
Whatever your favorite color is, you need to vote. But I think that people don't remember or don't realize that policy and policymakers are connected to voting. So more than ever, people need to be voting this year. Can you talk a little bit? That's my tangent. Can you talk a little bit about policymakers and organizations and how they can work together to either dismantle or lessen some of those systemic barriers that make it hard for Black people to access and to hit those 3 A's you talked about?
So I think this one of the things that I'll start off with, just from a national perspective, is making sure folks know that funding to support the SNAP program, funding to support local food systems initiatives, funding to support urban agriculture initiatives at a federal level from the U.S. Department of Agriculture is authorized in many ways by the Farm Bill that's reauthorized every 4 to 7 years. Who votes on the
Okay.
Farm Bill? Congress, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I know that, many elections get tied into hot button topics like gun violence and other things, right? But Congress ultimately decides where, sort of federal appropriations go related to agriculture and food systems at the federal level. So keep that in mind. And so it's important, particularly how, elected officials, whether it's at the city level, whether it's at the county level, the state level, wherever, it's very much so up to us as people to educate them about the things that we're interested in and the things that are going on in our communities. And so there are organizations that are doing great work in local food systems and building community gardens and educating youth. Make sure that, your city council person, your mayor, the state, the state representatives, the U.S., the Congress person, from your area. Make sure that they're aware of these things, because ultimately, these folks can put, resources and funding in place to assist with dealing with a lot of this stuff. And so
That's a good
it's
point.
yeah. And so, I mean, whether if we're holding a field day, invite the people out, right? So we talked about a lot of, cities and things that are engaging in urban agriculture and these things. A lot of these cities, from the mayor's office, are appointing directors of urban agriculture or some type of position like that, where they are understanding and seeing the importance of food systems and agriculture in their local community. Some folks would say that this is a very much so a blue wave, a very blue thing, but I don't know that, ensuring that people have access, or those that are interested in growing their food should not have access to grow their food, it is a blue thing. It's a human thing, right?
Right, right.
Um, and so, as much as we can educate these people about the community-based things that we're doing, because people in urban communities have been doing urban agriculture long before the U.S. government decided that they wanted to get involved in support. They were doing it in lieu of the government, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, to the best of our ability, inviting people out, showcasing people, making social media posts, and tagging our representatives, our mayor, our city council people, so that they are aware of what's going on, and hopefully we can shift some additional resources to support these things.
Yeah.
At this point, to say people are ignorant of what's happening may be a stretch, because they should be aware, because it's not something new. But what I found is that a lot of these folks, when they grow up they reside over and oversee communities where these things are happening. Some people simply don't know. They say they don't know.
Yes.
So let's do the best of our ability so they can't say that anymore. Let's put it in front of
Yeah.
them. Invite them to a field day. Invite them to a community event where we're showcasing some community garden. Don't give them an opportunity to say that they didn't know this was happening.
That is excellent advice, and I hadn't thought about that, but that is really good advice to make sure that especially the local folks know, because it trickles down. Everything trickles down, from the highly ranked political officials, but also there are local things like you just said. Your city councilmen, your mayors, they decide how the money gets spent a lot of times, and it can be spent over here or over there. So making sure that they are aware and unable to say they didn't know is excellent advice, especially at the local level, because that could make or break access to a farmer's market or a community garden. So it's a very tangible thing to make sure that they know what's going on.
Well, and not only that, I mean, the Congress may not know in Columbus, Ohio, where there's open and available land that could be used for a person to start a farm or to start a community garden. But the local city council person would know that the local mayor would do that. So we're not work with the city council, the mayor, or the local land bank to establish opportunities for blighted land to be
Yeah.
transitioned into urban agricultural plots. It does a lot for community beautification. It does a lot for environmental stewardship. It does a lot to feed people in communities. And so
Yeah.
these type of initiatives and this type of support is popping up all over the country. And actually, I'm working with a group of people in partnership with the USDA's Farm Service Agency and three institutions, that we're hosting a National Urban Agriculture Conference in Detroit in a few months. And so we're
Okay.
hoping to bring all of these stakeholders together to have a conversation, because what we know is, while we have support right now to do these things, and federal support, depending what happens in the 2024 election, and who takes the White House and who takes the Congress, and I'm beating my gavel with my headphone here, will say a lot about if there's continued support for initiatives like urban agriculture, level to which
Yes.
we have additional support for those types of initiatives.
Yes. Yes. It is all connected, and it is every election cycle is important, but right now it is uber critical, because things could look a lot different depending on who's in the White House. So
Sure.
let's talk a little bit. You touched on educating. You touched on educating people through the school system, and how back in the day there was home ec. Back in the day there was woodworking. There was. I feel like they groomed and educated people back in the day to actually be able to get through life successfully
Absolutely. Sure.
with real life skills, home ec, woodworking. They had the sometimes they would have like a parenting type of class for at-risk teen girls. I mean, they had stuff in place that was like, this is really what life is about when you get out of here.
Sure.
And a lot of those things have gone away. Like some schools don't even have recess anymore, unfortunately. But what are some ways, if people are thinking, okay, from the educational system standpoint, what can we do as educators or educational systems to bring in culturally relevant nutrition education so that we can engage the Black youth and Black people to make healthier food choices and advocate for that systemic change that you talked about?
This question is right on time. Last week, I got to see one of the coolest things that I'd seen in a while. I was
Ooh.
invited to take a tour of Samuel Green Charter School in New Orleans. And the program that is facilitating this work is called Edible Schoolyard. Edible Schoolyard is a national program. I encourage people to look up Edible Schoolyard. Um, but at this charter school, and Edible Schoolyard has a collaboration with the charter management body that facilitates it. So I think Edible Schoolyard is in, I think, 4 schools in New Orleans. Um, I got to see a 6th grade class, a 6th grade homeroom. The homeroom was, 30 or so kids, but it was split in half. Half of the kids were in the kitchen, and Edible Schoolyard does gardening and kitchen training in these schools. 6th graders now were split. Half of them were in the kitchen learning how to prepare foods. And so this particular day, they were learning how to cut peppers. They were learning how to mince garlic, sort of the base
Ooh.
things that we put in meals. They actually had real knives that they were showing them knife etiquette, cutting board etiquette, how to properly sanitize the kitchen.
Yes.
Those old school skills that we talked about, these 6th graders were learning it in the classroom.
Yeah.
While that half of the class was in the kitchen, learning that piece of it, the other half of the class was outside. And the school has an amazing gardening program with it. So that particular day, they were learning about different garden tools, the functionality of those garden tools, how you manage those garden tools, safety in the garden, all with the premise that, in a few weeks, they were going to begin to plant different crops at the school garden, which was a cool thing.
Right.
And programs like that are possible, not because the school system is so great necessarily. I think that charter school does a pretty good job. But because of programs like Edible Schoolyard have the funding necessary to hire the staff to go into these programs and facilitate these trainings, right?
Yeah.
And so at the local community level, if there are organizations that are interested in K-12 education, why not go in and sort of create some type of partnership with the local school system to do these trainings, or create some type of after school program where a part of it is whether it's the boys or girls learn how to roll in the kitchen versus learning how to roll outside. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, I live in South Louisiana. The amount of men that can handle their business in the kitchen better than women, that's the thing here in South Louisiana.
Yeah.
If you look at a lot of new and beginning farmers, you have a lot of women that are becoming new and beginning farmers and taking control and starting
Wow.
farms, right? And so there's ability for, no matter where you fit into the gender paradigm, to learn and find a place. And those things are helpful because once you learn how to prepare foods, you're not intimidated with, well, I don't know what to do with that, or it's some
Yep.
product in the produce section that you've never heard of. They got 6th graders growing up in the inner city of New Orleans that's in there
Yeah.
mincing. I don't even mince garlic. I buy my garlic already minced, but they're learning how to mince garlic and use a knife to do all of that stuff. It's pretty cool. Learning skillets and learning how to prepare
Yeah.
sauces from that stuff, right? So those type of programs do a great job. And I'd say just if there's organizations, whether it's churches creating after school programs to do these things, I mean, those are things that communities can take control of. Communities
Right.
again have to go back and take control of our youth and develop our youth like we once did.
Right. I love that. Especially the part about, it's something that I didn't even think about, but like technique in the kitchen. You're so right. But I didn't think about it because, but going back to my mama, she old fashioned.
Yeah,
And we had to dip into them Alabama roots often, but as a young teenager on up, because by the time you're 13, you have to know how to cook 15 meals in my family,
Sure.
like front to back. So as
Are you cooking from
coming up,
scratch out here?
you said, well, oh,
You cooking from
what?
scratch?
Heck yeah. You better know how to cook everything from scratch. What if the apocalypse come and all you have is flour?
It's all
I'm
right with
just
me.
saying. But my mom used to call us in the kitchen and she'd be like, she does it to this day. She'll say, come here, let me show you how to do this. Okay, so you want to make sure you have a paring knife so you can do this. I'll be like, Lord Jesus,
Yeah.
mom. So yeah, like I eat fast food, I dine out and all of that. But when you talked about mincing garlic, like it's always some garlic, some fresh garlic, onions. You can have a full week of food if you have garlic, onion.
Yeah, the
All you need
basis
is
of the
garlic and
basic
onion,
makes up. Yeah,
some flour.
absolutely.
Listen, but I think that sounds like a phenomenal program. And I like that it eliminates, it sounds like it probably eliminates that fear and just comfort of being in the kitchen. Because if you can be comfortable in the kitchen and you can be comfortable making your own meals, you can be more comfortable grocery shopping, and it's all connected to just overall eating healthier and better. So I love that they're instilling that in the youth down there.
I mean, you think about it. I mean, you instill it in the youth, but there's a number of parents out here that go in the grocery store and go in the fresh produce section and wouldn't know how to prepare some of the stuff that was there. And so, how do you alleviate that? You started the kids, and
Yeah.
kids can go home and train their parents too.
Yeah, yep. That's phenomenal. Well, thank you so much. That was super insightful. I love the information you provided. Are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
I wasn't prepared for this part. I'm afraid. Let's roll.
You know these questions. The first one is, what does wellness mean to you?
I think wellness means that people are. I like to use the term happy, whether that's
Mhm.
physically, uh, mentally, spiritually, economically. You're just in a position where you're happy, and I'm not talking about like a fake generated happy. I'm talking about at a place where we're just at ease with our existence and things are going great.
Ooh, I like that. Ease of our existence. Yes, I
Yeah.
like that one. I love it. And then why is Black health literacy important?
I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right? From a health perspective, um, we will know something is wrong with our physical health and seek not to go and check what's happening with us. And
Yep.
so if we understand that sort of full gamut of the process and understanding the importance of what we eat as a part of that, those outcomes on the back end, we're less likely to experience those things. And so just like, food literacy for all is important, understanding what's good for our body, health literacy is a part of that, understanding how those things make our body function, or taking a step back, understanding the things that we need to be putting in our body that allows our bodies to function at their maximum capacity. And so, unfortunately, in many ways, it's things that whether they're pulled out of the school systems or just in educational systems in general,
Yeah.
it's one of those most important things because at the end of the day, we manage our bodies, we manage our livelihoods, and we should be able, we have to take control of that process
Yeah.
from intake to coming out, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Okay, I love that too. Managing our bodies. I might put together a managing our bodies event.
there you go. That's it.
I'll credit you.
I'll come be an usher or something.
And last but not least, Marcus, where can people find you, follow you? Before we started recording, just for my audience, I feel like he teaches everywhere, but you're all over the country. It seems like, but if people want to know where you are now, follow your work, follow your mission. What is the best way to engage with you?
All of my socials, all of my website is just Dr. M.A. Coleman. So website drmacoleman.com, Instagram and Twitter, Dr. M.A. Coleman, are my social links. And I've just been blessed to be in a space where I get invited into rooms and be a part of conversations to try and change narratives or understandings or literacy, if you will,
Yeah.
around food systems and the importance of strong and equitable food systems. I also have the great privilege of educating people about food systems and allowing them to take that information and sort of go and change the world. And that's one of the
Yeah.
things that I appreciated about being at a place like Tulane and having food-based conversations and even having an agricultural background, not just an academic agricultural background, but I am legit from agricultural country
Yeah.
in rural Northeast Louisiana. So it's a privilege and a blessing.
Yeah. You really are, because you can drive a tractor, right?
Absolutely. I drive a tractor or a BMW. You just let me know. I can put
Academic.
I can put some J's on or some cowboy boots, whichever you need.
Oh my God. Well, thank you so much, Marcus, for coming on and sharing your expertise. I hope I never see you in cowboy boots.
I got
Sticks.
you.
So
I got
don't
you.
put the cowboy boots on. I think we're going to see a lot of cowboy boots this summer because of Beyonce. It's going to be a
Not
mess.
those silver plated boots. We need real cowboy boots.
Oh my God. But yes, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and being my first two-timer guest. Yes, two-timer club. Thank you so much. You've been
Absolutely.
phenomenal, and I hope that people receive this information and are educated.
No, thank you so much for having me.